Welcome everyone to today's webinar from Entrust and presented and aided by Blue Chip. We're just going to give everyone a couple more minutes to join. So please, if you haven't grabbed a coffee yet and you're looking, need a snack, have a minute or two to go grab those essential webinar sitting items. We'll be with you in a sec. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We've got a lot of people on the call on this webinar today. I wanted to today what we've got is the Entrust webinar on people, process, and technology: the road to post-quantum cryptography. And we probably don't realize that we take for granted that around us is cryptography that, some of it was developed, many decades ago, and that, that as time goes on, as computers are getting more powerful, that we may, we probably are heading, or we are heading to a cliff that where this cryptography that we rely on could be, could be broken. But but we can plan for that. It's not there yet, but it is something that is not too far away. Ian, our guest today, guest speaker, will tell us a bit more about that, a bit more about the challenge. The reason we've brought Entrust in is to present this is Entrust to sort of lead the way with strong identities, for secure payments, trusted infrastructure. And those things, in a practical sense, are things like SSL certificates, digital certificates for signing of documents, certificate management, certificate lifecycle. So certificates in cryptography is kind of the DNA that makes up Entrust. So they're the experts, and they're the ones that are very forward-looking and got the solutions to help implement or discover what cryptography we have out there, and how do we plan for this post-quantum world that is coming. So we'll get Ian to click over, and I'll just introduce our agenda, give our agenda, and introduce ourselves. So we'll just go through at the end a bit of an overview of Entrust. We've got the main presentation from Ian. At the end of that, we'll have some Q&A, and then we'll have our lucky prize draw that's there, and then we'll have some more Q&A if we need to have that extra time. So myself, I'm Matt from Blue Chip. I'm a product manager, so I look after the Entrust, Sophos, and CyberArk vendors. And today we've got Ian from Entrust, who is one of the consultants, one of the cryptography experts that Entrust have on their staff. Pretty much everyone in that, at Entrust is, an expert in, digital security and cryptography. So it's great to have Ian on the call. So Ian, I'll hand over to you to kick it off.
Thanks very much, Matt, and welcome everyone. Just so I can focus on the slides, I might turn off my video as well while I'm presenting. So I'll turn that off and we'll get on with it. So I want to start off first of all by just sort of doing a bit of a level set and just talking about what are we talking about when we say post-quantum cryptography. It's a bit of a a shortened abbreviation, and it really means post-quantum means after quantum computing effectively becomes available. So really post-quantum cryptography is cryptography that is going to be useful to us after quantum computing becomes available and economically feasible to crack some of the current cryptography we've got. So that's what that means, just to define the term. So obviously quantum computing is a key point about this whole thing. And let's first off talk about what is quantum computing. Well, if you know much about quantum mechanics and physics, etc., it's a pretty mind-bending sort of thing to try and get your head around how quantum computers work. Quantum, down at the quantum realm, things do really strange things. And if you think about a standard sort of computer that we use these days, it uses bits, ones and zeros, as we're familiar with. And what we really talk about when we're using quantum computing is using things that are using quantum mechanical properties, which are very, very strange. And famously, Schrödinger, when he was in an email, in a letter to Einstein back in the day, was sort of saying, this is so weird, you know, like how would you explain this at a macro level? It'd be like having a cat in a box and you know, Geiger counter there, which if it went off, it would trip a vial and poison the cat. And you wouldn't know whether the cat was alive or dead until you opened the box. But he said, what we're really saying with quantum mechanics is that the cat can be in a superposition. It can be both alive and dead at the same time. And clearly that's sort of ridiculous at a macro level. Now, people have speculated maybe it isn't so ridiculous at a macro level, but anyway, this is sort of weird stuff. There's this uncertainty principle, there's this spooky action at a distance, there's quantum entanglement, there's all these strange things going on, and it's actually quite difficult to understand unless you're sort of well versed in the field. So if you think about what Einstein said about it, he called quantum entanglement spooky action at a distance. So even he found it really quite strange. He thought spooky action at a distance actually defied general relativity, that information could move faster than light and things like that. So I don't claim to understand it in detail, but what we really do know is that this stuff actually works, and we can actually use it for real in terms of the in terms of building machines and things that actually do it. So a quantum computer is something that actually uses these quantum mechanics properties of superposition, interference, and entanglement, and it uses qubits, not bits. And with a bit, of course, you've got a possible state of a 0 or 1, whereas with a qubit, you've got a 0 or 1 or a superposition, and it only turns out to be a 0 or 1 whenever you measure it. So when you measure things, you change things at that quantum mechanical level as well. So there's several competing technologies about how these are built, but they use various different things. And based on the theory, they can perform some types of calculations significantly faster than classical computers can. But, you know, this is stuff that's quite complicated. It's very difficult to scale up to practical usage. And one of the things that is true about it is that at least for some types of quantum computers, they really have to operate at close to absolute zero, which is, you know, minus 273 degrees Kelvin. So it's very, very cold. So if you look at this image on the left here, the actual quantum computer is somewhere buried in the depths of this chip down the bottom. And most of what you're seeing here is all this sort of cooling equipment to actually chill this down to incredibly low temperatures so that you get superconducting properties happening. And that's an important thing to bear in mind, that these things are not easy to build and put into a chip that can just be used anywhere. They're really things that are only likely to be available in large installations where all this cooling can happen. So what are people building quantum computers for? They're building quantum computers really to better simulate quantum mechanics, and that's still the main purpose. They're not building them to actually crack cryptography. That's a unfortunate side effect that's come about. So they're doing things like representing molecules, doing drug design, studying biology, things like that. Financial market simulations is another another area that it's been postulated that they'll be useful for, etc. So that's what they're doing. And if you think about quantum computers, it's not likely that they'll be replacing our general purpose computers these days. I like to think about it like a CPU plus a GPU. They're specialized things that do different things. Maybe we'll call them QPUs, quantum processing units, who knows? But they will have this issue that they need to be very cold. So probably what you'll see is that quantum computers will be available in the cloud. In fact, they already are. You can find you can put workloads on quantum computers from a couple of different vendors through all of the major cloud vendors, through AWS and Microsoft and Google. You can actually run quantum computing workloads on existing quantum computers that are out there. But it's pretty unlikely that you're going to see it in your laptop at least anytime soon because of this problem of having to make these things extremely cold. And anyway, there's a lot of view that why would you need it there anyway, because the cloud is the way everything's going, as we all know in this industry. So effectively, quantum computers are going to be specialized, not general use, and useful at certain classes of problems. So that's quantum computing. Let's also just clarify a term. There's another thing called quantum cryptography. So today we're talking about post-quantum cryptography, which is cryptography after quantum computers. Quantum cryptography is actually a different thing again, and they're very similar names, so they're easy to confuse. So quantum cryptography is about using quantum mechanics for cryptography. And this is really things that, you can use quantum cryptography to protect data for very, very long lifetimes, and they're actually useful against quantum computers. So part of the answer to how do you deal with quantum computers, you could use quantum cryptography potentially as one of the ways to actually protect against it. So typically they'll transmit a one-time pad, which is theoretically provably unbreakable cryptography. The problem with the one-time pad is that the key has to be as long as the data. And that is a severe limitation, obviously, but a one-time pad is actually unbreakable cryptography if you've got a properly random key that's being used, but the key has to be extremely long. So there's a lot of view that post-quantum cryptography, which is traditional cryptography that's resistant to quantum computers, is seen as the way to tackle the quantum computing threat rather than using quantum cryptography. So an example of quantum cryptography, though, that is probably most well known is quantum key distribution, where you actually share cryptographic keys using small numbers of polarized photons over a laser beam or a line of sight or an optical fiber, that sort of thing. Yeah, so they're sending sort of like single photons down, they're polarizing them in different directions. And with the quantum mechanics properties, if someone is observing those photons, they will actually change the photons, and therefore you can detect an observer in the middle. So, therefore eavesdroppers are going to be detected, and the information therefore is theoretically secure way to exchange keys. But it has some problems, and this is actually being used. There's real world examples, including in Australia, etc., of this being used to exchange symmetric encryption keys from one end to the other. It has problems that it's not very scalable over very, very large distances easily. It's quite costly to do, but more problematically, it's subject to denial of service attacks. If you disrupt the communication, you can prevent someone exchanging the keys very, very easily. And it also doesn't provide a mechanism to authenticate the source of the two ends, authenticating the two ends to each other, basically. That's not actually covered in quantum cryptography or quantum key distribution. So that's just a sort of a level set to just make sure we understand the difference between post-quantum cryptography and quantum cryptography, which are different things with very, very similar names. So post-quantum cryptography is conventional computers able to withstand quantum computers, and that's the topic of this presentation, whereas quantum cryptography is about using quantum mechanics for cryptography. All I've got to do is find my mouse cursor how I can get off the bottom of the screen. There it is. So, unfortunately, quantum computing is a threat to current cryptography. As I said before, that's not a deliberate thing, it's sort of inadvertent. And the threat really is to all of the asymmetric algorithms. That's things like reverse Shamir Adelman, RSA, the digital signature algorithm, any elliptic curve cryptography, and also the finite field things, the Diffie-Hellman key exchange and the elliptic curve version of that. So virtually all of the asymmetric cryptography we use, or public key cryptography we use, is subject to attack from quantum computers. So there's an algorithm you can run on quantum computers called Shor's algorithm, and that can find prime factors of an integer much faster than conventional computers. So the current asymmetric algorithms will all need to be replaced with new quantum resistant asymmetric algorithms going forward. So this is what we talk about when we're talking about post-quantum cryptography. We've got a happier situation with asymmetric algorithms and hashing. There is some speed up with quantum computers using Grover's algorithm. There may be other algorithms developed over time, and that speeds up the searches. And with symmetric cryptography, the algorithms are safe against quantum computers if you double the key length. So if you think about now, the current recommendation is to use AES 256-bit, and that is to protect against quantum computers. The current expectation, you normally try to have about 20 years of runway, basically, to protect data. You should be using cryptography that's theoretically strong enough to protect you for the next 20 years, assuming increases in computing power, etc. So AES 128-bit is currently enough to protect against conventional computing for about the next 20 years. The reason why AES 256 is the current recommendation and standard is that's also building in the quantum resistance. Now, AES 256 is exponentially larger or exponentially stronger than AES 128-bit. If you think about binary digits, every bit doubles the size of the number. So AES 129-bit, if there was such a standard, would be twice as strong as AES 128-bit. So when we're talking about AES 256-bit versus 128-bit, it's not not twice as strong, it's exponentially stronger. So similarly with the hashing algorithms, SHA-2 and SHA-3, you can use the longer output lengths, which give protection against quantum computers. So 256-bit hashes are considered the appropriate for the moment. And just as a side point, some people think that SHA-3 is better than SHA-2, and to replace SHA-2, that's not the case. SHA-3 is set up as an alternative to SHA-2, just so that we've got not all our eggs in one basket. It's just a different type of algorithm, and it tended to be equivalent and similar and used in parallel with SHA-2. So what does that mean for modern cryptography? Well, we use cryptography everywhere, really. We use it for a range of different things. We use it for confidentiality with encryption. That's the sort of obvious one, but maybe just as important and a little less more obvious is using it for data integrity, which is message authentication codes or digital signatures to check that the information hasn't been changed by an unauthorized party since it was created. And also we use it for authentication. Is this really the device or person I think I'm talking to? So again, we use digital certificates, digital signatures, multi-factor authentication, that sort of thing, using cryptography for authentication. And there's another usage which is a little more subtle, which is about non-repudiation, which is being able to hold people to promises they made. So if someone signs a contract, you want to be able to say later, you signed the contract. You can't deny fraudulently that you signed the contract anymore. So they're the sort of main uses of cryptography. And all of those things are used in lots of protocols: TLS, IPsec, SSH, database encryption, VM encryption, storage encryption, tokenization, all those things, application level encryption, all of those things use cryptography for security, not just confidentiality, but integrity and authentication and non-repudiation possibly as well. And of course, it's affecting data at rest, data in use, data in transit. It's affecting cloud, on-prem, workstations, mobile devices, IoT, everywhere. So all sectors: business, banking, web browsers, IoT, cars, smart cars, etc., instant messaging, all of those things use it. So you can see that this threat from quantum computing affects almost everything we do in the IT realm at the moment. And the use of cryptography is increasing, as it should, because it's a strong protection, but it is under threat from quantum computing. So how soon? How soon is always the question, and it's a question no one can really answer with it's a bit of crystal ball gazing, because we're never really sure how long things will take. And quantum computers are already available, but they're still in experimental stages. They've got low numbers of qubits, and there's lots of difficulties trying to scale them up. There's quantum noise, there's other quantum coherence issues. So scaling it up is hard. Maintaining the coherence of the qubits, is for more than fractions of a second is also hard. So it requires lots of redundancy and error correction. And it's currently nowhere near breaking the current cryptography. And there's some people think it might never happen either. But, all the indications are that it's coming soon. There's lots of experimentation with different approaches. And most people, the consensus is that within about a decade or so, it will become a major concern. And one of the big concerns then is people doing harvest now and decrypt later, sucking up large amounts of data and warehousing it, and then attacking when they've got viable quantum computers to actually attack the data. So if we look at what is the sort of what's happening in the real world in terms of quantum computers, well, let's look at what IBM announced in this is 15th of November 2021. So it's a bit over 23, so it's been sort of like a year and a half ago, if I got my maths right. And they were talking about a chip with 127 qubits. And roll on to a couple of months back in November, they announced one with 433 qubits. So you can see that that's more than double within about a year, November to November. So it's scaling up quite quickly. And then if you look at other computers, the image I showed before was of a D-Wave system, and they're using a slightly different approach, but they're talking about in this year or next year, they expect to be able to have 7,000 plus qubits. And you say, well, how does that marry with what IBM's got there? This is not necessarily on a single chip, and with the IBM things, you can actually cluster things into larger configurations, etc. So this is talking about chips, this is talking about systems collectively. That's why there's a bit of a disconnect in the numbers. But either way, you can see that we're talking hundreds of qubits or thousands of qubits. That's the state of the art at the moment. So what do we get when we think about what do we actually need? Well, this is a quote that we found that sort of looks at trying to break 256-bit elliptic curve cryptography, which is what's used in the Bitcoin network as an example. So they're really saying that if you're going to crack that within 1 hour, you would need hundreds of millions of physical qubits to break that. And if you were going to do it within a day, a longer time period, you would need the tens of millions of physical qubits. So think about that. We're talking about the real world at the moment having hundreds or thousands of qubits. And this is saying for practical attacks on modern cryptography, you need hundreds or tens or hundreds of millions of physical qubits. So we're still a very, very long way from having quantum computers that actually can practically break current cryptography, but there seems to be a strong trajectory that these things will come over time. So this is where we get to post-quantum cryptography. And of course, if we're trying to develop new algorithms, etc., then it takes a lot of time. So if you think about what really happens, it's sort of over decades, really. And if you think about the change from things like the data encryption standard DES through 3DES through to replacing that with AES, for example, when we've replaced MD5, SHA-1, etc., these things actually take a lot of time. It takes time to develop new algorithms using the boffins in the academic world to actually come up with new approaches, new algorithms, etc. It takes time to standardize, and then it takes a lot of time for the adoption to kick in. And all the while that's going on, we're still using the old algorithms and they get phased out over time. But even when they're phased out, you've still got the problem that you've got old algorithms being relied on to protect historical data. So typically we're talking about a 20 to 30 year sort of timeline to do this replacement, which is why the process of trying to replace the current asymmetric algorithms with post-quantum algorithms has been well underway for a while. And if you look at the main process that's been driving this globally has been NIST, which is the US National Institute of Standards and Technology. There's been a lot of, obviously other countries and other places are taking a strong interest in this, but largely NIST is running the international competitions, and it's sort of the main game in trying to come up with new standards. So they're really trying to find quantum resistant algorithms. And we say quantum resistant because we can't be sure that it's not provable that there mightn't be a future quantum computer attack that can actually attack those as well. So they started the process in 2016 and plan to create standards around about 2020. Well, we're past that now and we still haven't got the formal standards. There were around about 82 global submissions in 2017, but many of those were quickly shown to be weak. They shortlisted 7 candidates, but almost immediately the rainbow was shown to be broken, not just against quantum computers, but with traditional computers. And there's other attacks against other things. So at the moment, they've chosen Crystal's Kyber as a general encryption algorithm for asymmetric encryption. They've got digital signature algorithms, Crystal's Dilithium, Falcon, and Sphinx Plus. And they still haven't chosen a public key encryption algorithm or public key exchange algorithm, but there were 4 finalists, but almost immediately one got struck out. That was Psyche, I think it's called. So this process has been a bit tortuous, and there's been a lot of difficulty, and it's definitely behind where everyone was hoping it would be by this stage, which is problematic because quantum computers keep developing quickly, and we have to get something in place soon. So if you think about the sort of timelines that people are talking about here, they're really sort of saying that, within the next few years, we're expecting cryptographically significant attacks against cryptography to be actually sort of effective within the next decade or so, and that we really need to be phasing out algorithms fairly quickly within the next few years, and certainly by the 2030s we need to have these new things in place. So it's coming quite quickly, and if you look at another indication of that is that the US National Security Agency in September last year released its Commercial National Security Algorithm Suite number 2, which uses the Crystal's Dilithium and Crystal's Kyber public key algorithms, AES, which we're familiar with, but 256 bits, of course, secure hash algorithm 2 with 256 bits, and they've got some new types of signature schemes based on Merkle trees and things, which have been around for a while, but they're definitely known to be resistant to quantum computers. But if you look at the sort of timelines here, most urgently they're talking about software and firmware signing, and they want to see the new algorithms being tested within the, currently they want to see it as the default option by 2025 and the old algorithms phased out by 2030. So that's pretty aggressive, and you can see that a lot of these other things, everything's sort of by about 2033, they want to see all of the old algorithms out of play and the new post-quantum algorithms in play. So that's pretty soon, and we need to sort of move on fairly quickly. So one of the ways that transition can happen is that we need to be able to use current cryptography alongside post-quantum cryptography. So there's different approaches. One could be to use multiple certificates, for example, alongside each other. We could also use hybrid certificates where there's both current algorithms, say RSA, and post-quantum algorithms like dilithium or Sphinx Plus or something in here, and they're both in the same certificate, and they're structured in a particular way. And there's another way of structuring it, which is to have a hybrid versus a composite. It's just really the way the things are structured in the X509 certificate format. And Entrust is actually working actively with draft standards in these areas, and we've put some things forward with some other players. So one of the implications of that is that certificates are going to get quite large. So typically RSA 2048-bit certificates are less than a K. ECC is smaller, and that's a useful advantage of ECC for a similar strength. But you can see with the hybrid certificates that we're talking about potentially up to like 3.5 megabytes, that sort of thing. And that means also that things are going to break, because some testing was done on things like OpenSSL and Java and so on, and it found that once you got over 100K in the certificate size, OpenSSL started to have problems, and Firefox had problems with over a certain size as well. So there's implications in many ways for these algorithms. There's also issues that some of the things like the XMSS signatures, you can only use the public key pair once. You can't use it multiple times, or at least there's a limited number of times, and there's lots of gotchas and differences in the way you actually have to use these algorithms. They don't become simple sort of drop-in replacements. One of the other ways that people have looked at transitioning is, and we've been involved in this, is to suggest that you might have both a classical key exchange algorithm whereby you get a symmetric key shared on both sides using a key exchange mechanism, one that's using a classical thing like Diffie-Hellman or EC Diffie-Hellman, and one that's using a post-quantum key exchange method. And then you actually put the two derived keys together to actually use that as the session key. So they're some of the sorts of things that are being looked at. So as I say, Entrust is actively engaged in all of these activities and looking at these options about how to transition. So that sort of brings us to what do you need to do about it now? How can you do things? Obviously, there's a problem when we don't have the standards in place. You can't immediately go out and put things in place. If the products and services out, the products out there that actually use these new algorithms, it's not easy to just simply make a unilateral decision you're going to change things. So the question is, what can you do now? Because clearly, because things are somewhat behind in terms of timelines, there's going to be a big rush to get these things ready in time. So it's a case of needing to be well poised and ready to move quickly when you're able to do so. And so obviously with you've got concerns about the timelines, you've got to be very prepared as quickly as you can. And the sorts of things that you should be doing to be prepared is do things like a cryptographic inventory to make sure you know where all of your cryptography is, how it's used, think about how it's actually being managed in your organization, whether you're being agile about it, whether you've got a quick ability to move to new algorithms and possibly new products if you need to, if those are not there. And you can think about things like quantum key distribution as well. And it's an important issue because crypto becomes increasingly important with the threats that we're seeing to cybersecurity is becoming an increasing concern, and cryptography is certainly one of the main tools we have to protect against it. It's part of an overall suite of things, including obviously your people and processes as well, not just the technology. And similarly, if you're looking at things, it's important to think about that you shouldn't just assume if you've got crypto in place, it's going to last forever. You have to actually be looking at how you continue to evolve with the times, replace old algorithms, roll over keys, all that sort of thing. And be aware that, you know, it's critical infrastructure that you have to look after. It's becoming increasingly important. At the same time, we've got the problem that cryptographic resources in terms of people are scarce and expensive. It's an area that, you know, we have a long-term shortage of skilled people in this area globally, and that's problematic. So you need to be efficient in how you use those resources and make sure you're getting good value out of them. You've also got problems that, you know, a lot of the risks are not known because there's lots of things you can't manage, and that you're finding out too late what's going on. So these are some of the difficulties, and often you're dealing with a trade-off between usability and security. You know, hopefully with the best type of solutions you get good usability and good security, but often there's a trade-off there where good security means you know, reduced usability or something. So if I jump forward, one of the things that we suggest people do is assess where they are in terms of cryptographic maturity, and hopefully you're somewhere between the unknown and the excellent end of the spectrum. But if you're at the unknown end, you'd be very highly reactive with lack of ownership of who owns the crypto in your organization. Without central policies, you don't know where the assets are. You've got silos and segmentation and no sort of roadmap. And of course, at the other end, you be highly proactive, got a good centralized crypto center established. You've got lots of tools and best practices in place. You've got strong support right at the top of the organization. You've got fast responses to fix vulnerabilities and comply with new standards, and you're very crypto agile, and you can manage those investments in a timely manner. And you can monitor emerging threats, and that you've got a 3+ year roadmap. And we can certainly help with putting help your organizations get to that point by doing consultancy work to actually assist with that. So another thing, if people are looking at quick wins, is that if you think about forward secrecy, which is that the cryptographic keys can't be found by looking back in time, etc. The TLS 1.3 protocol actually has in it a mandate that you use forward secrecy for key exchange. And what that means is that typically if you've got a RSA certificate or an ECC certificate with an asymmetrical key pair that's being used for server authentication, that typically is going to last you 2 years. That's a typical certificate life. You may also have optionally a certificate at the client for client authentication with TLS. It can be symmetric, or this end can be anonymous and do authentication in other ways like user ID, password, or multi-factor authentication. But then you also have the ephemeral Diffie-Hellman or ECDH asymmetric key at the server and at the client. And that is an ephemeral key that's used only once. It's used to exchange a symmetric session key that's shared at both ends, and then you do actually start doing the transfer. Now, if you think about that, the value of this is that this session key is derived from these two ephemeral keys, which are only used once. So these are not quantum computing safe. These are not post-quantum algorithms. This is not a post-quantum algorithm either. This can be quantum resistant. What you've actually done here is, instead of using the RSA key pair to exchange the keys as well as for authentication, is you've actually pushed the session keys into an ephemeral key that's only used once per session. So whilst this isn't quantum safe, it is actually upping the ante for anyone doing a harvest now, decrypt later type attack, so that it's really increasing the number of increasing the work that someone attacking you would have to do, even if they had a viable quantum computer. The value of what you're exchanging on that one session may not be enough to make it worthwhile to crack it. So that's a sort of a bit of a halfway house, but something that people can immediately do. And of course, people have been concerned about using TLS 1.3 because they want to do TLS inspection. The suggestion there is that you use TLS 1.3 externally, which has mandatory forward secrecy, and TLS 1.2 internally, where forward secrecy is optional and you can turn that off. So another thing you can do to get familiar with post-quantum crypto is we have the option pack for the N-Shield HSMs, and that has all of the candidate algorithms in the NIST process, and you can get familiar with using those candidate algorithms, including Rainbow, which is of course now considered obsolete, and you can do that within the N-Shield code safe secure execution environment inside the HSM. So you can load that pack in there, and you can actually use the HSMs to do post-quantum cryptography right now and experiment with it. Even though it's not fully standardized, and you may have to be looking at what you can make it work with in the future. But if you're building stuff internally, you can certainly get familiar with post-quantum crypto that way. And that can be used in N-Shield hardware security modules on premises or securely hosted by Entrust using our N-Shield as a service approach. And there's also another thing we're offering is with our Pkis as a service, there's a beta for post-quantum, and you can use that for generating quantum certificate authority hierarchies and test multi-certificates or composite certificates within applications. And of course, that's supported by our N-Shield HSMs as well. So just to sum up, what have we really learned? We've learned that quantum computing workloads will soon be cost effectively available in the cloud, most likely. That quantum cryptography, including quantum key distribution, is a separate thing to post-quantum cryptography, so don't get the two things confused. And that the current cryptographic algorithms are susceptible to cryptanalysis using quantum computers. There's new post-quantum cryptography algorithms being standardized right now, and the PQ algorithms are not going to be drop-in replacements. And things you can do now, quick win, use TLS 1.3 for forward secrecy. You should be talking to your vendors, IT vendors, about their post-quantum cryptography plans. You should be doing cryptographic inventories and assessing your cryptographic maturity, and we can help with Entrust Crypto Agility Maturity Assessment Consultancy. You should be aiming for crypto agility, be ready for new compliance requirements that are going to come in, and get familiar with post-quantum cryptography by using things like the post-quantum SDK for N-Shield HSMs or the Pkis as a service beta. And if you look at our website, there's quite a lot of resources there if you want to investigate and learn a bit more. There's some very interesting stuff on the Entrust Engage podcast, if you want to look at that, which has a lot of information about post-quantum there. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say, and I'll hand back to Matt.
Beautiful. Thanks, Ian, for taking us through that. There's kind of a lot to take in. There's a lot of academic information that that's out there now and that sort of thing, but it is narrowing down to a point which is with standards evaluations and the people trying to actually now crack and break these post-quantum algorithms, which I've seen in the in the news, but not with the algorithm itself. I think it was something about a side channel attack or something like that on the the actual implementation of something. So it's there's a lot happening in this this sort of space. To bring it back to the practical sense of things you can do to take action now, the Entrust is a sort of a leading provider of digital security solutions. You probably don't know, but your passport or your your wallet actually contains a lot of the the physical Entrust security solutions, but the digital security is where we're all living now, and that is where we where we need to pay attention and look forward at how do we plan for these sorts of things that are coming, and how do we implement them now. So if you're you would have seen, Ian said there's Entrust HSM, so hardware security modules, so they're protecting your keys, and you can use the PostQuantum algorithms there, the Pkis as a service, so this is managing your keys, the life cycle of your internal keys, and the distribution, renewal, revocation of those, and things like document signing as well is some of the things that Entrust involved in. And definitely, I recommend signing up to that podcast. It's I think there's a few different podcasts from Entrust. Definitely keeps you up to date with the things that are happening in this cryptographic world, and with digital certificates and digital security. So I definitely recommend that. I think we'll go to before we go into question and answer. If you do want to take some next steps, today was very much a thought leadership, a high level, just to give you an idea, to show you that Entrust is an expert in this space, someone you can consult. Definitely email entrust@bluechipit.com.au, or you can email myself, Matt G, MATTG @bluechipit.com.au, and we can have some chat about certain things. One of the things that Entrust do offer is a post-quantum or a cryptographic assessment. So this is a service that we can bring in some experts to look at where your cryptography is around there, and sort of create a forward-looking plan of how to bring all those under management, so where they are, to then be able to then when the time comes, change those algorithms where you need to make sure that you're staying ahead of it. So we'll jump into Q&A just to see if there's anyone that's got any questions. Just checking the question answer bit. Not too many questions. A lot of thanks for the presentation, Ian, and things like that. Someone has asked in there, like, in transitioning to these cryptographic algorithms, what do you think the most difficult things are going to be? What are Ian? It's
Sure.
what's going to be the most difficult things to transition to this new world with new cryptographic algorithms everywhere?
I think one of the difficulties mainly is just the having products talk to each other using the standards. You often need different products to be talking to each other, so that's where compliance with standards and having matching cipher suites at both ends and things is going to be a bit of a challenge, I think, for a while. So that's going to be one of the things. And one of the things we're recommending is people look at the sort of choke points with that. What are the critical things that might stop you moving forward? In some cases, you might need to think about switching to a different product if it doesn't support what you need to match with your other things. So it will be a bit disruptive. And that's the sort of analysis we think people should be doing. So being aware of what algorithms are being used, what cipher suites are supported in different products that need to talk to each other, and look at that.
Yeah, definitely. I think we all take for granted kind of a lot of the standards that we've had for many years. I think what RSA was 1977 or something like that. It's we've been reliant on those, the old for a while, for a long time.
That's right. We've been very lucky with RSA because it's useful in so many ways. You can use it to encrypt data, you can use it to sign data, and you can use it for key exchange. And that's not true of almost any other algorithm. And we've been a bit spoilt with RSA. And as I mentioned, some of these new ciphers will have quite different needs and processes that you need to do, and there'll be traps for young players of reusing things that sort of destroy the security. I mean, if you one example that people have failed with a lot in recent times is using, not with post-quantum algorithms, but with current algorithms, using GSM mode, which is I never pronounce it properly. GOAS, I won't even try to pronounce it. But anyway, GSM mode of AES is one that gives you both encryption and authentication. It gives you a message authentication code in the same cycle as generating the encryption. And it's a very useful mode. It's very widely used these days. But if you reuse the same key and the same initialization vector with GSM, then someone can crack your data thereafter, because it effectively builds a counter cipher, and any counter cipher where you have the IV and the key reused can be used by XORing the things back together. You can actually retrieve data or retrieve keys. So there's a lot of assumptions people make about how you use cryptography, that you can just allow people to nominate an IV rather than generating IV being initialization vector. Each time you need to be very careful about how you use that, and there have been some classic fails with those sorts of things in the past from quite large companies actually getting that wrong. So I envisage there'll be a lot of those sorts of problems with the new post-quantum algorithms, with reusing things that you shouldn't reuse. So some of the approaches and usages are going to be different. So when you're looking for crypto agility and modularity, you want to be looking at a fairly broad brush level about modularity, rather than down at a fine grain level of just assuming that you can switch one algorithm for another. That probably won't be the case.
No, that's right. You've definitely reading on about a lot of about password managers and things like that these days, and the incidents that happen. There's you've got the algorithms, but then it can be the implementation by the people using them that is flawed. There's a lot of focus on this at the moment, which is which is great. I think it's pretty interesting area, and people get to really understand some of the differences between the encrypting data or authenticating data that we probably just thought it was just cryptography or certificates. So it's really good to highlight and bring this to light. So, Ian, thank you for presenting today. I've seen I think every time I see this post-quantum content, I'm getting more of an understanding of it, hearing different things as each speaker talks. So really appreciate you taking the time to provide that information and your expertise to all of us.
My pleasure. And yes, certainly feel free to get in touch with Blue Chip or Entrust, and we're happy to help you navigate this area, and always keen to help.
Beautiful. No, thanks very much. And just with the door prizes and the registering first prizes, we'll contact those people separately. We've got all those there. It's I think it was the first 20 to be registered. So thanks everyone for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a look out for any for other Blue Chip webinars at bluechipit.com.au. We've got a lot coming up. Come and learn some more. Speak to you all soon, and have a great day.